You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
There's something jarring about walking into your own home and feeling like a stranger. That's the only way I can describe what hit me when I opened the front door that afternoon, like the house exhaled something it wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be a normal day. My flight back from Los Angeles landed ahead of schedule, and with the client meeting rescheduled last minute, I figured I'd surprise Madison. Maybe take her out for lunch, spend some rare daylight hours together for once. It had been a long few weeks, and I thought, naively, in hindsight, that a little spontaneity might help us reset. But instead, I stood frozen in the entryway of our home in Scottsdale, trying to place the scent in the air. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable over the clean citrus smell of our usual plug-in diffusers. But there was something else underneath, unfamiliar. A musky, expensive cologne. Slightly peppery. Paired with a whiff of alcohol that clung to the air like static after a thunderstorm. I shut the door behind me, footsteps light on the hardwood, letting my eyes scan the foyer. Everything looked untouched. Shoes lined up neatly near the hall closet. Madison's cardigan draped over the back of the couch. Our daughter Lily's school backpack slumped against the base of the staircase like she had dropped it in a hurry, nothing out of the ordinary, at least visually. But the scent. It wasn't mine. I don't wear cologne unless I'm heading into meetings with people I don't trust, and even then, it's subtle, barely there. This was stronger. And it wasn't cheap either. I knew designer scents when I encountered them. You don't spend 10 years in cyber intelligence without picking up a habit for observation or a distaste for patterns that don't fit. I made my way slowly into the kitchen. That's when I saw the wine glass. Just one. Long-stemmed. A deep Berg asterisk and Y-ring staining the bottom, lipstick red clinging faintly to the rim. The kind of lipstick Madison only wore on date nights. Or hadn't worn in a while, if I was being honest. I stared at the glass for a moment too long, listening. The house was still. No music. No TV. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and my own pulse rising like static in my ears. Then I heard her. Madison's voice drifted down the stairs, casual and warm, like nothing was wrong at all. "You're home early." I forced my expression into something neutral, something smooth. "Yeah," I called back. "Meeting got canceled. Figured I'd come home instead of sitting in airport traffic." She came down the stairs barefoot, drying her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was immediate, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes that I almost missed, almost. "Nice surprise," she said as she stepped into the kitchen, kissing me lightly on the cheek. Her hair was pulled up, a few strands escaping and brushing her collarbone. The gray cashmere sweater she wore hung just off one shoulder, loose and deliberate in a way that felt planned. "You okay?" she asked as I lingered by the counter near the wine glass. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Long day. Just trying to settle back in." She glanced at the wine glass and I caught the way her fingers tightened around the towel. "Just for a second. You have company?" I asked casually. "Nope," she said quickly, reaching for a cabinet. "Just me. I might have poured a glass earlier, but I didn't drink it. Got distracted." I let the silence hang between us long enough for her to feel it. "Anyone stop by?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Oh," she said, pausing with a hand on the spice rack. Ben from next door dropped by. Asking about the retaining wall construction. "Nothing big? You know Ben, more nosy than helpful." "Makes sense," I said, watching her out of the corner of my eye. "But that's it," she added quickly. "Why? Something wrong?" "Not really," I replied. "Just noticed a scent when I came in. Cologne. Didn't smell like Ben though." She laughed too loud, too fast. "Well, maybe Lily sprayed something in the hallway. You know how she's always stealing my perfume." I shook my head slowly. "No, it wasn't Lily's perfume. And it wasn't yours either." She set the towel down with more force than necessary. "Simon, are you serious right now? You come home early and start sniffing around the house like a bloodhound." The edge in her voice was sharp. Defensive. That wasn't like her, not unless there was something she was trying to steer me away from. "I didn't say anything," I replied, still calm. "I just asked." "Well, it sounds like you're interrogating me." "That wasn't my intention." "Is it ever?" she said, crossing her arms now. "This is that spy stuff bleeding into our marriage again, isn't it? You don't know how to turn it off. Every time something's out of place, you start spinning stories in your head. It's exhausting." I stared at her. Not angry. Just quiet. "You think I'm being paranoid?" "I think you're overthinking everything," she said. Like always. Maybe she was right. Maybe the years in cyber intel had conditioned me to detect patterns, to distrust coincidences. Maybe I'd spent too long in rooms where smiling faces hid knives. But that's not what this was. I knew my wife. I knew her rhythms, her moods, her tells. And something was different now. Something in her voice. Her posture. The way she redirected reframed. In my line of work, we used to say, if someone tries to close the window, check the back door. You're right, I said finally. I'm probably just tired. Madison's shoulders relaxed a little. She turned back to the stove as if the conversation was done. But I was still watching. Not her hands or her face, but the space between her words, the lies that float just beneath the surface when someone wants to be believed more than they want to be honest. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter again. I might grab a quick nap, I said. Didn't sleep much on the flight. She nodded, her back to me. Go ahead. I'll wake you when dinner's ready. I turned and headed upstairs. But I didn't nap. I walked past our bedroom and paused outside her office door. It was closed, which wasn't unusual. Madison worked remotely 3 days a week, and she liked her privacy when she was on calls. But something about it felt sterile. Like the room had been reset. I kept walking, heading into Lily's room. It smelled like vanilla and markers and the faint scent of her cherry shampoo. Normal. Real. I sat on the edge of her bed for a minute, trying to quiet my thoughts. But they wouldn't stop. Not now. The wine glass. The cologne. The change in Madison's tone, the pivot from warm to cold in a matter of seconds. It wasn't just the scent. It was everything around it. Later that evening, over dinner, Madison was all smiles again. Talking about weekend plans, asking if I wanted to help her pick up plants for the backyard. On the surface, everything looked fine. But once you've seen the fractures, it's impossible to unsee them. I listened, nodded in the right places, even smiled when she made a joke about Ben's dog tearing up our flower bed. But inside, I wasn't playing husband anymore. I was back in analyst mode. And I had just discovered my next mission. There's a quiet that settles over you once suspicion takes root, not loud, not dramatic, just a low, constant hum. Like a pressure behind the eyes or the buzz of a light that won't shut off. I felt it the next morning as I stepped outside for my run. The sun was barely up, the Arizona sky still painted in pale blues and dusty oranges. Normally, I ran to clear my head. This time, I ran to sharpen it. With each step, memories began to surface, little things I had dismissed in the moment. Madison changing the password on her laptop last week. At the time, I didn't think twice. She claimed it was some security update from her firm, something about new protocols. I even nodded, told her she was smart for staying ahead of hackers. But now, in hindsight, it felt like a lock on a door that used to stay open. And then there were the wardrobe changes. She'd always been stylish, but over the last month, the shift had been sudden. New heels, new bags, outfits that felt curated rather than casual. I'd asked once, lightly, what the occasion was. She smiled and said she just needed to feel fresh again, like it was some phase all women went through. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But then came the late-night phone calls. 2 weeks ago, I found her on the back porch just after midnight. I'd gotten up for water, glanced out the kitchen window, and there she was barefoot, whispering into her phone, her body lit by the soft blue of the screen. When I opened the door, she jumped. Sorry, she'd stammered, clutching the phone like it owed her money. Just needed some air. I asked if everything was okay, and she waved me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just work stress, she said. My team's expanding into Europe. Different time zones. But there was no urgency in her voice, no trace of professional concern. Just nerves. I didn't press then, but I should have. Because afterward, I noticed the scent she carried when she came back inside, something floral and sharp. Not her usual perfume. And definitely not one I recognized from our bathroom cabinet. Then there was the earring. A week ago, she walked in holding a small silver hoop in her hand. I was at the sink rinsing off dishes when she said, "Look what I found in the car, must have fallen between the seats." She held it up like a prize. That yours? I asked, drying my hands. Nope, she said, twisting it between her fingers. Not mine. Probably Lily's. But Lily doesn't wear earrings. She got her ears pierced years ago, hated the sensation, and let them close up. I reminded Madison of that. Her response? A quick shrug and a pivot to whether I'd remember to take the trash out. At the time, I chalked it up to forgetfulness. Maybe it was Lily's or a leftover from carpooling one of her friends around. But now every one of these things, the glass, the cologne, the earring, the password, they started to link together. Like coordinates on a map. I had been connecting dots for other people my entire career. Why hadn't I seen my own? The run ended, but my mind didn't slow. When I got back home, Madison was already in the kitchen, frying eggs, humming to herself. She looked at me over her shoulder and smiled. You were out early. Felt good to stretch my legs, I said, wiping sweat from my brow. She poured me coffee without asking, just like always. But her timing was off. She placed it down before I even sat, like she needed to stay one step ahead of the conversation. Thinking of heading to the outlet mall later, she said. I saw this set of patio lights I liked. Want to come? I shook my head. Got a project to finish for a client. Maybe later. Suit yourself, she said, sipping her coffee. We didn't talk much more than that. The rhythm between us had changed. The small silences used to feel like comfort, now they felt tactical. I found myself studying her, not as a husband but as a profiler. Looking for micro-expressions. Studying her cadence. Did her voice rise slightly when she lied? Did she blink too quickly when I asked neutral questions? She didn't seem nervous. If anything, she was too smooth. That's what scared me. Later that day, I logged into the home Wi-Fi router. It was an old habit left over from my Intel days to occasionally check what devices had connected to the network. Most were familiar: my phone, Madison's laptop, Lily's tablet, our smart fridge, even the garage door controller. But something new stood out. A device labeled iPhone GXC78 had connected 2 nights ago around 10:23 p.m. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't Madison's work phone. That one always showed up with a Verizon tag. Strange. I cross-referenced the connection logs. The device had connected briefly, just long enough to pull data or send a message. The MAC address was masked, but that wasn't unusual for newer iPhones. Still, the timing lined up with the night I found Madison on the back porch. Coincidence? No, not anymore. That evening, I brought it up lightly over dinner. Did Lily's friend Julia come over Tuesday night? Madison glanced up, chewing slowly. Tuesday? No, I don't think so. Why? I thought I heard someone out back around 10:30. Maybe it was the wind. She blinked once. Weird. I don't remember hearing anything. Her tone was smooth. Too smooth. I wanted to ask her directly who was here, but something held me back. I wasn't ready for the conversation that might follow. Not until I knew more. In my experience, accusations without evidence only serve the accused. They turn your suspicion into the story. I wasn't going to give her that. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up and pulled out my old encrypted drive. It hadn't been used in years, not since I left the field. But it still worked. On it were a few tools: packet sniffers, timestamp loggers, basic surveillance templates, nothing fancy, nothing illegal. Just enough to collect without alerting. I set up a passive recorder on the network. Nothing invasive, just metadata, timestamps, device IDs, volume of data transferred. I wasn't interested in reading her emails. I wanted a pattern. Over the next 3 days, I started noticing more gaps. Madison had started locking her office. Not just closing the door, locking it. She said it was to stay focused, but I noticed how she always shut her laptop the moment I entered the room, how her phone screen dimmed instantly whenever I walked in. The screen faced down constantly, now another red flag. And then there was the car. I checked her GPS logs. She didn't know I had access to the old tracking app we used when Lily first started driving, back when we shared the SUV. Madison had since inherited that vehicle. Last Friday, her log showed a stop on East Camelback Road. A high-end condo complex. She claimed she'd gone to Home Depot for planters. Planters, sure. The condo had no associated visit history, no friends we knew, no business reasons to be there. The timestamp showed she parked for over 40 minutes. Just enough time for a conversation. Or something else. By Saturday night, I had stopped lying to myself. This wasn't anxiety. It wasn't hypervigilance. It was data. It was a pattern. And it was deliberate. There's a line between suspicion and confirmation. Once you cross it, there's no going back, no pretending, no rationalizing, no more maybe. The moment you see it with your own eyes, you lose the luxury of doubt. That was the line I was preparing to cross. On Thursday morning, I told Madison I had a conference in San Diego. 3 days, 2 nights. She smiled in that casual, supportive way she always did when work pulled me away. Kissed my cheek, told me to send photos from the hotel. I said I would. I even rolled a suitcase to the car and drove to the airport. Only I never got on the flight. Instead, I circled around, picked up a rental under a friend's name, and drove it back across town to a parking spot I'd reserved 2 blocks from my own house. An angle with clear visual access to the garage. Not front-facing. Just close enough. Before that, I spent most of the afternoon installing a discrete camera above the side garage entry, motion-activated, wide-angle, silent. Took less than an hour. I had the tools, the know-how, the discipline. I left no sign of entry, no traces. Madison wouldn't suspect a thing. I sat in the rental car most of that Friday waiting. Watching. Letting the Arizona heat melt the time off the clock. I had food, water, backup batteries, and a fully charged laptop tethered to a mobile hotspot. Surveillance 101. I'd done worse jobs in more dangerous places for far less personal reasons. Around 5:20 p.m., Madison left the house in gym clothes, yoga mat in hand. She looked calm, peaceful. She backed the car out like it was any other day. I watched her drive off and disappear around the corner. She didn't go to the gym. I tracked her through the GPS software still hidden in the SUV's diagnostic system. It showed her pulling into a small grocery plaza on the other side of town. Not a gym. A different area entirely. And just like that, the tracker cut off. She'd turned off the engine, which also cut the feed. Smart. She was adapting. She came back a little after 7 o'clock, parking like nothing happened. I saw her carry a small grocery bag inside, a bottle of wine and something in a paper bag. She didn't see me. She didn't need to. I already knew what was coming. The trap was set. Just past 8:40 p.m., the motion alert pinged my laptop. My eyes snapped to the feed. The garage camera came to life, a black sedan pulling into the driveway. It wasn't a neighbor's car. I'd never seen it before. Dark-tinted windows, aftermarket wheels. The kind of vehicle someone drives when they don't want to be remembered. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Mid-30s. Fit. Confident. Button-down shirt tucked in, no tie. The way he moved was practiced, too casual to be nervous, too familiar to be visiting for the first time. He didn't knock. He went straight to the side door. The one Madison always keeps locked from the inside. But this time it opened immediately. He stepped in. The door closed. A moment later, the downstairs lights dimmed. I sat there in the car, staring at the feed. There was no audio, no dramatic soundtrack. Just the cold, high-resolution footage of betrayal confirming itself in real time. I could have gone to the door. Could have marched in, confronted them both. But I didn't. I watched. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know. Not just feel it, not just suspect it, know it with certainty. Data. Evidence. Clarity. They moved upstairs. The living room light clicked off. The hallway camera caught Madison's silhouette leading the man by the hand toward the bedroom. She was laughing. Not loudly, but clearly. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. The kind of laugh I thought had disappeared. They disappeared from the frame. And that's when the anger hit. Not like a fire. Not like rage. It was colder than that. Controlled. A kind of internal click like a door closing for good. I didn't feel the need to scream or cry or lash out. That part had passed weeks ago. This wasn't shock. This was confirmation. And it changed everything. I let the camera record. Timestamped every second. Stored the footage in an encrypted folder and uploaded a backup to cloud storage under a dummy email account. Then I waited. Around 11:37 p.m. the camera pinged again. The same man stepped back into the garage. Shirt untucked now. Hair a little messy. He got into his car and drove off without a glance behind him. No rush. No fear. Just confidence. He was used to this. I watched Madison turn off the downstairs light 15 minutes later. She didn't look around. Didn't peek outside. Didn't check the cameras. Why would she? She thought I was in California. She went to bed alone. Or maybe not. Maybe he was still there. I didn't care anymore. The truth had already landed. I drove back to my friend's place, the one whose name I used for the rental. He let me crash in the guest room. Didn't ask questions. Just nodded when I walked in and handed me a beer. I didn't drink it. I sat in silence for an hour before finally falling asleep with my shoes still on. The next morning, I returned home as if I had just landed. Madison was in the kitchen, same sweater from Thursday, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, you're back. I thought you weren't landing until tonight. Caught an earlier flight, I said, setting my bag down by the stairs. Good trip. Productive. She walked over and gave me a quick hug. It felt empty. Hollow. I'd been gone for 3 days and she held me like we'd seen each other at breakfast. I didn't say anything about the wine. Or the man. Or the garage footage. Not yet. She asked if I wanted eggs. I said no. Then went upstairs, took a long shower, and stood under the water until it turned cold. That evening, while Madison watched a documentary on the couch and scrolled through her phone, I sat in the study organizing files, labeling footage, printing logs. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning precision. See, cheating isn't just about infidelity. It's not even about S**X, not really. It's about deception. Intent. The quiet, relentless erosion of trust, the kind that changes how someone breathes when they speak your name. And now I had more than instinct. I had evidence. I had leverage. I had a plan. And the war was just beginning. They say knowledge is power, but that's only half the truth. Power comes from knowing how to use it, when to push, when to wait, and when to make someone think you know nothing at all. That's the path I chose. The morning after I confirmed the affair, I ate breakfast across from Madison at our kitchen island, sipping coffee and nodding politely as she talked about a new landscaping podcast. She was animated, relaxed. Her eyes sparkled the way they used to when she believed something exciting was around the corner. I smiled and listened. Didn't say a word about the man in the black sedan. She thought I was still in the dark. Good. In the days that followed, I returned to routine. Morning runs. Contract work in the office. Casual dinners. I kissed her goodnight. I packed Lily's lunch when Madison had early Zoom calls. I even fixed the leaky outdoor faucet she'd mentioned 3 weeks ago. But every night, after they were asleep, I sat at my desk assembling a dossier quietly, methodically, like I'd done 100 times before for clients who needed to expose corporate espionage. This time, the target wasn't a foreign agent. It was my wife. And the circle around her. The first thing I did was extract the full contents of her work laptop's deleted messages. I'd cloned her hard drive months earlier when she started changing her passwords. I hadn't looked into it at the time, chalking it up to workplace stress and privacy. But now, I dug deep. It took my cybersecurity contractor 3 hours to decrypt the archives. He called me later that night. "You're going to want to see this," he said. The messages were more than personal. They were strategic. Her contact, the man in the footage, wasn't just some random fling or coworker. His name was Grant Whitaker, a corporate attorney based in Phoenix. A fixer. Someone you hire when you need a document to disappear or a deal to slide through red tape without questions. But the real shock was the connection. He wasn't working alone. He was working for Judge Graham Eldridge. My father-in-law. Madison's father. That part hit harder than the affair. See, I've known Graham for 15 years. When Madison and I were dating, he was a local circuit judge, charming, stern, always well-dressed and well-prepared. A man who commanded respect. I used to think he didn't like me because I wasn't from his world, military kid turned analyst, not Ivy League, not polished. But now I saw the truth. He didn't dislike me. He distrusted me. Because I couldn't be controlled. The recovered emails painted a picture far more calculated than I ever imagined. Grant wasn't sleeping with Madison for fun, he was cultivating her. Guiding her. Grooming her to serve a larger purpose. And she was willingly participating. They weren't just having an affair. They were leveraging me. She'd been using her access to my digital infrastructure, my secure contacts, private datasets, federal archives I consulted for clients to quietly gather intel. Some of it minor. Some of it enough to sway certain outcomes in court proceedings Graham was presiding over. Madison's role? She passed along selective data under the guise of marital conversation. Nothing documented. No trail. Nothing that would flag suspicion from a legal standpoint. Until now. I had the metadata. The exact times she copied certain file hashes. The correspondence where she asked Grant to clarify the legal scope of quiet suppression orders. And worst of all, mentions of Lily. They had talked about her. Not by name, but the implications were unmistakable. Phrases like emotional leverage and long-term influence over paternal subjects. She was a chess piece. Our daughter. My daughter. That broke something inside me. The rest of that night passed in silence. I stared at the emails until my eyes burned. I didn't know whether I was more enraged by the betrayal or the coldness of it all, the way Madison could smile at me at dinner while helping destroy the very things I built to protect our family. But I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. I wouldn't just confront her. I would dismantle everything. Piece by piece. I hired a second contractor, this one an investigative accountant. I gave him one name, Grant Whitaker. He returned with something more explosive than I could have hoped for, a network of shell companies and payment structures tied to offshore accounts. Cayman Islands, the Isle of Man, and one disguised as a charity for displaced veterans. Dirty money disguised as goodwill. I also reached out to an old contact, a DOJ liaison I once helped with a leak tracing case. I didn't give him details, just asked if Judge Eldridge had ever recused himself from federal cases involving corporate clients in the energy sector. His reply? Not once. That didn't match what the emails said. This wasn't just an affair or a family betrayal. It was judicial corruption. And Madison was the hinge point. That weekend, we hosted a small barbecue. Friends. Neighbors. The usual suburban performance. I grilled steak, poured drinks, even complimented Graham on his vintage cufflinks. He smiled warmly and clapped my shoulder. It's good to see you and Madison looking strong again, son. I looked him in the eye and said, we're stronger than ever. He had no idea. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, I watched Madison standing in the kitchen, folding towels like nothing was wrong. I asked, do you ever worry about consequences? She paused, blinked, then turned to face me. Consequences? Yeah, I said. When people take shortcuts, lie, use others, doesn't that ever backfire? She tilted her head and smiled faintly. You've been watching too many crime shows. I smiled back. Maybe. Then I kissed her goodnight and uploaded the entire contents of the dossier to 3 encrypted drives, 1 local, 1 cloud, 1 offline. I wasn't just documenting her betrayal anymore. I was preparing to bring down a system. And it started with her. It started with a phone call. 10:16 a.m. on a Thursday. Madison answered first. I was upstairs organizing documents for an upcoming security audit when I heard the tone of her voice shift, cheerful at first, then quiet, then clipped. I stepped into the hallway and saw her standing in the entryway, one hand on her hip, phone pressed tightly to her ear. By the time I came downstairs, she had hung up. Her eyes met mine. That was the campus police. It's Lily. The silence between us was instant. What happened? Madison's lips pressed into a line. They said she's being detained. Something about lab chemicals. An investigation. My mind blanked for a beat, then narrowed like a lens. What kind of investigation? They didn't say. Her voice cracked slightly. Just that we need to come immediately. We drove separately. I didn't want to sit in a car with her. I needed time to think, to prepare, to settle the fire in my chest before it became something unproductive. Lily had always been cautious. Bright. Precise. There was no world where she'd willingly jeopardize her academic standing, not unless someone had cornered her into it. The campus police station was tucked behind the main quad, red brick and glass, trying too hard to look unthreatening. When I walked in, Lily was already in a conference room. Pale, eyes wide, shoulders hunched in that specific posture that doesn't come from guilt, it comes from disbelief. Madison was holding her hand. Her voice was soft, maternal. Rehearsed. The officer, a mid-tier campus security lead, explained that Lily had allegedly accessed a restricted chemical storage cabinet using a cloned access card. The logs showed her entering after hours. 2 containers were missing. They found one in her locker. Evidence, he called it. I looked at Lily. She shook her head slowly. Dad, I don't even know how. I raised a hand gently. I believe you. Madison turned to me. We should listen. Let the facts play out. The officer added, Judge Eldridge has already been contacted. He's familiar with this kind of case. He's willing to assist with legal counsel. Of course he is. I glanced at Madison. She looked back, not afraid, but calculated. As if she were assessing how well I was keeping it together. I nodded once and said, we'll handle this privately. Afterward, when we stepped outside into the midday heat, Madison suggested we grab lunch before driving home. I declined. Instead, I followed her car at a distance, then turned off 2 blocks before our house. I parked and opened my laptop in the back seat. What had just happened wasn't spontaneous. It was a maneuver. The timing, the presentation of evidence, the legal help from Graham, it was all too convenient. The missing chemical container had a typed label in Lily's handwriting. I taught her to write in block print for legibility. The container in the evidence photo used rounded cursive. Sloppy forgery, but it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be fast. Enough to scare her. Enough to scare me. To make me compliant. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about destroying trust. It was about leverage. If they couldn't control me directly, they'd control the person I cared most about. If Lily had a mark on her academic record, or worse, a criminal file, I'd be compromised. A silent hostage. Grant could manipulate me into silence. Graham could pull strings through redemption favors. And Madison? She could act like the bridge between both worlds, comforting wife and cooperative accomplice. I drove home slowly, letting the wheels of a different plan begin to turn. Later that evening, Madison approached me in the kitchen. Lily had locked herself in her room. Her dinner sat untouched on the counter. I spoke to my father, Madison said softly, her back to me as she filled a glass of wine. He thinks it's best we handle this quietly. Plea deal. No trial. Just community service and sealed records. I said nothing. Simon, she asked. Still nothing. She turned, glass in hand, eyebrow raised. I'm trying to help our daughter. No, I said calmly. You're trying to manage the fallout. The smile slipped for just a second. Excuse me. You heard me. She set the glass down. This is your paranoia again. I stepped forward slowly, holding her gaze. If you want to see paranoia, Madison, I suggest you keep pushing. She didn't respond. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I accessed Lily's university network using a backdoor exploit I developed years ago for educational compliance audits. Within 15 minutes, I retrieved the original keycard logs. They'd been tampered with. The metadata showed timestamps edited within the last 48 hours inserted after a secondary overwrite. Whoever did it knew what they were doing, but not well enough to cover the trails. Even better, the security footage from the night in question had a 4-minute gap. Static, digital distortion, then a perfect resumption of frame. Classic overwrite insertion. I copied everything. Then I ran a parallel trace on Graham Eldridge's most recent financial transfers. Through one of the shell accounts tied to Grant, a payment of $11,700 had been wired to a private contractor who had previously worked on a university lab renovation, someone with access to keycard programming. The paper trail was narrow, but it was enough. I documented everything. *TS. Chain of custody logs. Forensic backups. I printed hard copies and stored one set in a sealed envelope inside a safety deposit box under a different name. The second set I mailed to a contact in D.C., a compliance attorney who owed me a favor. The final copy I kept, because this was no longer about clearing Lily's name. This was about exposure. On Sunday evening, Madison tried to play peacemaker. She brought me tea. Sat across from me on the couch. We've been distant lately, she said. I know things haven't been perfect, but we can fix this. We just need to protect Lily. I looked at her hands, perfect manicure, not a single tremble. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even sorry. She was still playing the role. Do you ever wonder, I asked, how you got so good at lying? She blinked. What? Never mind, I said, sipping the tea. We'll talk soon. That night, I added the final pieces to the dossier. A full copy of Madison's encrypted messages with Grant, including the ones where they debated the risk of targeting the daughter directly versus framing it as an academic mistake. They had chosen the latter. Less obvious. Easier to spin. Cowards. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just watched the plan take shape, the plan they thought would break me. But they had underestimated the most dangerous thing of all. A father who knows he's being hunted. And is finally hunting back. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, the air was fine, but in that sterile, echoing way that makes everyone speak just a little quieter, as if the walls are listening. Lily sat beside me at the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't said much that morning. Didn't need to. Her eyes were red, jaw set in that determined way she used to wear before a big exam. But this wasn't school. This was her future. Across the room sat Judge Graham Eldridge, her grandfather, flanked by 2 attorneys and looking every bit the composed patriarch. When his eyes met mine, he gave the faintest nod. No warmth. Just assurance, like he already knew how this would end. Madison sat a few rows back. Her posture perfect. Her phone off. She wouldn't meet my gaze. The prosecutor stood and began reciting the accusations. Improper lab access. Mishandling of controlled materials. Suspicion of intent to distribute, a stretch so absurd it should have made the courtroom laugh. But no one laughed. Because when someone powerful wants to burn you, they make sure the smoke looks real. I waited. Just before the judge could speak, I stood and reached into my briefcase. From it, I pulled a sealed manila envelope. Thick. Heavy. Months of work in one simple package. I'd like to submit new evidence, I said calmly, walking it up to the clerk. This pertains directly to the origin of the charges. The judge, not Eldridge, but a substitute appointed due to conflict of interest, raised an eyebrow. Go on. Within minutes, the room fell silent. They flipped through surveillance stills showing a masked figure entering the lab. They read metadata logs proving timestamp tampering. They saw wire transfers connecting Graham's offshore trust to a known fixer. The most damning document, a printed conversation between Madison and Grant Whitaker discussing the pressure tactic of framing Lily as a way to destabilize me. When the judge asked if I had supporting authentication, I handed him the hard drives and notarized affidavits. Graham sat frozen. Madison went pale. Grant didn't even show up. Lily turned to me, whispering, "What is this?" "Proof," I said. "And freedom." The judge declared the hearing suspended pending criminal investigation. All charges against Lily were dismissed. Eldridge was escorted from the bench, his credentials revoked on the spot. Within hours, his assets were frozen and a formal inquiry into judicial misconduct was launched. Grant was arrested the next morning. And Madison? She walked out of the building alone, her heels clicking across marble like a punctuation mark no one asked for. She wasn't charged, but her name was now forever attached to the file. She had betrayed her husband, endangered her daughter, and aided a federal conspiracy. And she did it with a smile. The envelope didn't just expose them. It ended them. 2 years passed. Lily graduated with honors from the Colorado Institute of Technology. Her thesis? A study on digital forensics in academic fraud. She now consults for legal oversight boards, helping ensure what happened to her never happens again. I stayed in cybersecurity, but I changed my focus. I teach now private seminars for government officials, judges, and compliance officers. My specialty? Spotting internal corruption before it becomes public tragedy. Graham Eldridge died in federal prison 6 months into his sentence. Heart failure, they said. I didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Madison. Grant Whitaker took a plea deal. 22 years for fraud, coercion, and obstruction of justice. His name is now synonymous with legal manipulation. No one will hire him. No one visits him. As for Madison, she was never prosecuted. She sent letters, emails. One even arrived handwritten on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind she used to use when writing thank-you notes. Each one asked for a second chance. For forgiveness. For the possibility of rebuilding something. Lily never replied. Neither did I. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend with words. Madison still lives in Arizona. Alone, as far as I know. I don't track her. I don't speak of her. When Lily asks questions, I answer what's necessary, no more, no less. Some truths don't need to be revisited. They just need to be remembered. People sometimes ask me if I regret anything, if I wish I'd seen the signs earlier or acted sooner. But here's the truth, I don't regret the suspicion. I regret the trust. And I'm okay with that. The story started with a scent, faint, unfamiliar, easy to dismiss. It ended with silence. The kind that comes when a storm passes and you're still standing. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what mattered most. And we did.